This is argumentation 101 and prep time. So let's start with preemptive blocks, and this is really good in theory, but it can be difficult to apply in your debate. So this is where if you have an argument that you think your opponent is going to rebut with a certain point, and you know how to block that, then you can bring up in your speech, now my opponent may say this, but it's actually not the case because of this. And that will save you a lot of time and it'll make you seem a lot more intelligent. Another thing is time signals in your constructive, which should be the full 4 minutes or 5 minutes, depending on the structure you're using. You should have time signals in it that say at what time should you be in your speech, because you will most likely be timing yourself. And I know that I tend to speed up a lot when I get nervous. So when I have those time signals in my speech, I know, oh, it's 1 minute and I'm at 45 seconds. I should slow down. Okay, in your speeches, do not address your opponent as you, call them my opponent or my opponents, except in crossfire, then it is okay to address your opponents as you. Because remember, you are trying to convince the judge, not your opponent. And a fun kind of activity here is, who is the judge? The judge is God. Why are they God? Because they decide who wins and loses, not my opponent. Who is my opponent? They don't exist. Why don't they exist? Because they are a mere dissenting voice to the truth I speak the truth. It's actually really important to speak in a very self-assured manner and with a lot of confidence, because then you don't have to worry about convincing yourself, your opponent, and your judge. Yeah, never address your opponent in your speeches. So in the middle of one, say your defense, you can't ask your opponent a question, and your opponent can't ask you a question. An argument is not an argument if it's not complete. This applies to any argument you may make, even ones in your rebuttals, defenses, and final focuses. So it has to have a claim, basic statement, the essential argument, example, dogs are awesome. It has to have a warrant, which is a reason why it can be evidence-based or not. And the example there is dogs are awesome because they are great companions. And it has to have an impact. Impact is the most important part of the debate. It is why your argument matters. It is why the judge should vote for you, the significance of the argument. So, for example, it would be dogs are awesome because they're great companions and I live alone in my apartment. It's important in your speeches to extend, which is bring up your arguments in your next speech. So this is where if you have extra time and you're done tearing your opponent's case down, then you have to bring up your own case and either rebuild it or just talk about the points and explain why they're important to the round. You always need to have taglines in your argument, which is just a summation of the evidence, and you read that before you read the evidence. Otherwise, the judge and your opponent are not going to know what this evidence is on. Speeching. This is just kind of like practicing a bit. It is good to talk in front of mirrors and cameras. It gets you used to talking. Be critical of yourself, but not overly critical, and do be willing to take criticism from peers and friends. I know that can be hard. I personally struggle with it, but it's really useful if you can. Moving on to rhetoric. This is more theory stuff, and you don't like directly apply it to your speech. It's just subtly. So ethos, it's credibility, you look smart, so that would be evidence. Willing to admit when you don't know. If you try to filibuster and talk around the subject without actually answering it, then you will seem shady and evasive and you will lose credibility. You should be willing to admit when your opponent does well, but don't really do that in round. And always rebuild your case before attacking when rebuttaling. Pathos, emotion, personal experience stories. It helps the judge to picture it. So what would you want your daughter to do? Or would you want your daughter to do that? Logos, logic, it's most of the appeal, just simple logic, common sense. So that would be the warrant. Oops. And cateros, this is actually rarely applied, but if you can, apply it well, then it really works well, which is know your duck. So know who you're talking to. If you see you have a lay judge, which is a judge that doesn't know much about debate, then it would be good to kind of like dumb down your speech a bit and talk slower. But if you have a judge that's really experienced, then you can kind of let loose and talk to your best ability. The structure for the middle school style, which is what I think we're doing right now. So the affirmative constructive is 4 minutes, negative constructive is 4 minutes. Make sure to use up all your time, and a good way to do that is with the time signals that I said earlier. Crossfire is 2 minutes, and crossfire is one of the most challenging speeches for middle schoolers. Affirmative rebuttal and negative rebuttal, they're 2 minutes. Crossfire is after rebuttals, another 2 minutes. Defense is 2 minutes, and then final focus is only 1 minute. So you really have to be prepared for that. And you only have a total of 2 minutes of prep time. And I'm getting into prep time now. So don't use your prep time before constructives or crossfire. It's not worth it or needed. So prep time is the time you have that you take to prepare your next speech, to prepare your next points. And generally with this format, you should use around like 45 seconds for rebuttal, 45 seconds for defense, and 30 seconds for final focus, but it's fine to use it differently. Just make sure you have a decent amount of time for preparing for the 3 speeches. Don't use like 1 minute and 30 seconds preparing for 1 speech. Otherwise, you are kind of screwed. Obviously, use your opponent's prep time when they use it. You prep. If there is free time when your partner is speaking, your opponent is prepping. Do not just sit there. Come up with arguments and defenses and flow your own case. Use all the prep time by the end, even if you don't think you need it. Even if you have like a minute of prep time left before your final focus and you have like everything you need to go over, use your prep time.